how to work and how to cooperate with others. In delivering delve into further discussion. Hence, I present both official and personal perceptions and expectations on governance, management, and financing of secondary education in Ghana, to chart a path for the discussion as we look into the future. As the title suggests, we'll be looking at governance of secondary education and management, and because of time, I may combine this. Then we'll look at the financing of secondary education, which I believe will be very, very interesting topic to discuss. In doing that, we will look at the historical development of secondary education funding. And we ask ourselves, if it is your business, will you continue on this path? Then we end with some policy choices that will ensure financial sustainability, recommendations, and a short conclusion. So, I wouldn't want to bore you with reading, but I would just, because Section 3 of the Pre-Tertiary Education Act, 2020 Act 1049, includes in its explanation of free secondary education a sense of what secondary education is. It presents secondary education as being essentially composed of many forms, including the technical and vocational institutions. Although it does not mention grammar-type education, a cue taken from the white paper delivered as the government response to the Animal Ministers Committee's report refers to grammar-type schools as an offering for secondary education in Ghana. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, the official governance structure of secondary education is three-tiered. First is the General Oversight Body, which is the Ministry of Education, followed by the Education Service, formerly known as the Ghana Education Service. I'm sure that will not go away. And then the school system. Subsequently, then diffused into a sparse arrangement to include parents and guardians, the community in which the school is located, and the past students of the schools. It is worth clarifying here that the participation of learners is in the school system. Section 1B of the Pre-Tertiary Act states that secondary education comprises 3 years of senior high school and 3 years of technical and vocational education and training. Section 4, subsection 2, 3, and 4 is about the management of pre-tertiary schools, and stipulates that the Regional Education Directorate shall take responsibility for the effective and efficient management of senior high schools. The Technical and Vocational Education and Training Service shall take responsibility for the effective, everything about the Act is effective and efficient, of the pre-tertiary technical and vocational education and training. Faith-based schools shall enter into memorandum of understanding with the Education Service for the effective and efficient management of faith-based schools. Now, Section 11 of the Act is about the functions of the Governing Council. That the Council shall advise the Minister on policy, ensure the effective and efficient implementation of basic and senior higher education system, ensure the effective performance of the functions of the Education Service, and advise on any other matters relating to the basic and senior higher education that the Minister may request. Now, the interesting part is Section 37, which states that which is about the management of public basic and senior high school. A school management committee for the management of public basic school, or a board of governors for the management of a public senior high school shall be formed. A school management committee or a board of governors shall ensure that the public basic or senior high school is managed in accordance with the laid down rules and regulations of the Education Service. My interest in this is in the fact that this group of people are not allowed to do their work. Now, let me jump and move on. So some features that pop up so clearly are regulation, governance of secondary education is regulated, the types and processes of decision making, what rules and guides are being enforced, and how these are tuned to ensure effectiveness and efficiency. In this case, the expectation is that each of the tiers will understand its role, so that when furniture is needed in a school, nobody will call the Minister of Education and put their request or complaint to him, when at the local level, the board and the district director of education are available. The Director General technically reports to the Governing Council, which is the Education Service Council. In practice, however, it does appear that instructions and directives from ministers of education over the years tend to have more prominence, and sometimes without the knowledge of the GS Council. This has led to an overbearing influence of the Ministry of Education in the day-to-day running of the education service. This is not good for the development and effective management of our secondary schools. The expectation is that with the governance and management system in place, neither the Director General nor the Minister of Education will perform the role of a headmaster or a headmistress. The lack of clarity regarding the clear delineation of some of these roles and the penchant to interfere in the roles assigned to other levels of management have undermined the governance and management structures established by law and created the impression that every problem should be resolved in Accra. There appears to be a missing link or overexuberance that is undermining the communication between these three tiers, or among these three tiers. In 1987, the government of Ghana embarked on a process to decentralize education management to districts throughout the country as part of a program of a wide was the prescription of active community participation in the affairs of schools within their localities. The establishment of school management committees, SMCs, at the basic level, and the reconstitution of the governing boards at the second cycle level, and the recognition of PTAs were to create a new school governance landscape based on community participation, as well as a devolution of power to the metropolitan, municipal, district assemblies, and schools. The education decentralization, unfortunately, has not been allowed to work. As such, the education service, like all other public service agencies, still operates a rigidly centralized system, and the common expression is only one person in GS has address, which is the Director General. Centralized systems of management and governance creates numerous leadership and management challenges, including delays in disciplinary matters, delays in service delivery, and denies the development of skills. It is one thing to pass legislation that shifts power, authority, and responsibility and influence from one level to the other. Such a shift is a change in structure only. But it is another thing to build the capacity at the school level to enable the desired impact on learning, management, and leadership at the school level. The need for capacity is no doubt real, but it is sometimes overstretched or used as a facade or an excuse to delay the empowerment of decentralized levels at the decentralized levels, and thus delay the devolution of functions to them. Within the dynamically changing context under which schools now operate, school management has taken on a and show marked contrast in roles and responsibilities. School management now requires the participation and collaboration among members of the school community, board of governors, parents, and all students' missions, the development of skills in leadership management and in decision-making, planning and budgeting, while the leadership skills of school administrators, particularly those of an interpersonal orientation, such as negotiation, consultation, conflict resolution, building ownership, and commitment to decisions, emerge as critical for school heads to contend. Now, some key issues I would like us to reflect on as I end this session on governance and management. 1, understanding of roles of various actors and the obligations, respecting the functions of other actors, and ensuring compliance as defined by law. It's important. Number 2, are secondary schools overregulated in the governance, decision-making, and enforcement of rules and procedures, including disciplinary matters, which always have to be finally pronounced by the Director General? And I say this because when we were in school, at least those days, our time at Prempeh College, Osai, Mr. Rena at Achimota School, F.K. Bua, O.K. Money, J.J. Mensakane, and those people, as if they owned the school. They took full responsibility. I'm not sure at that time we were kids. I'm not sure whether they were controlled as much as we see now. And they produced all-round people. I remember all those who came from Achimota School at UST, to UST. They were different. The Van Sanforms and Ralph Sutherland, and many of them, Metal Nunu, they were all-round people. Academics, they were there. Sports, they were there. Everything. And I remember sometimes when we were hard-pressed in Ghana, Ralph and some of his colleagues represent Ghana in the Ghana Abidjan Games because of their training in Achimota School. Now, our school boards, clothed with the authority and space to play its role as governing body, in the capacity of boards, in the composition of boards, are there requisite mix of skills? Are the requisite mix of skills needed for effective governance form the basis of deciding on who sits on school boards, including the representatives of interest groups? To what extent does the Education Council appreciate its own oversight role of governance of the education service, and what should be the nature of engagement between it and the Minister of Education? Why have stakeholders been too quiet and allowed Minister of Education and Director General to run the show? Where are the voices of parents and the missions? All we hear is that we want our school back. Speak enroll students. Those schools are of different sizes and varied. A one-size-fits-all approach has been adopted in their regulation and management. Interestingly, all schools are classified, with Class A schools being about 60. Heads of schools, school management, and governing boards have little or no discretion to vary instructions received from the Director General or the Education Service or the Minister of Education. And the governing board and DS Council are normally always very quiet. So these are some few areas that you may be thinking about. Now, financing of secondary education in Ghana. Financing secondary education is currently a hot yam in the mouth. The inadequacy of sustainable financing for secondary education is a major challenge in the running of schools. Indeed, decisions about education financing are necessarily political, and with the introduction of free SHS, spending on schooling, especially at the secondary level, has become more political than ever. In this section, my presentation will be guided implicitly by these 4 key questions on education financing. That's if time allows me to finish. How much should be spent on schooling, and what level of spending is reasonable? Who should pay for schooling? Parents, governments, other stakeholders, and how should the cost be shared? How may resources be distributed and allocated to the constituent parts of a school system? How do we increase education outcomes, access, equity, quality at reduced or reasonable cost? I relate these questions to financing and sustaining the free SHS. To put the discussion in context, permit me to start a historical review of the development of secondary education financing in Ghana, with specific emphasis on policies relating to secondary education finance. Also, the section presents a review of trends in secondary education expenditure, as well as the sources of financing secondary education in Ghana. I also draw on financing models of some selected countries. Now, on historical development of secondary education funding, it started from Governor Gessler's time. This was evident from the 13th section of the 16 Education Principles of the Educational Ordinance of 1925, which states that education cannot be compulsory and free. A vigorous attempt to expand financing of secondary education by the central government started in the early 1950s. Nkrumah's administration placed great emphasis and attention on secondary education, since the government regarded it as the nucleus for educational human resource and national development. Hence, in contrast to the colonial era, the Accelerated Development Plan for Education of 1951, introduced by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, supported the financing policies of free compulsory education. But it didn't last long. The Education Act of 1961 also advanced the cost of equity provision to enable both deprived and privileged groups to benefit from education. However, the Act did not address all problems relating to the management of funds in schools. For example, the abolition of the fees varied in different regions of the country. In the North, parents were made to pay for books. In the North, parents were not made to pay for books, while in the South, they had to pay. An example of those who can pay, let them pay. Now, secondly, supporting mission schools and private schools to become fee-free was a complex issue, which raised questions about the definition of free education for all children and whether the definition was shared by all. In 1973-74, the government of Ghana's new perspective on education financing was to increase cost effectiveness, cost recovery, and to reduce misapplication of financial resources. To this end, it was to phase out all residential and feeding subsidies at the secondary and tertiary levels, as well as increased textbook user fees at these levels. Another aspect was the policy to develop loan and scholarship systems for poorer students. Implicit in this new provision was equity, suggesting that free education should not necessarily be applied to all children. Thus, for cost effectiveness, parents who are capable of paying should be made to fund their wards' education. The 1987 education reform was to contain and partially recover educational costs and to enhance sector management and budgeting procedures. The FQ policy of 1996 extended the compulsory and free education policy, but we know that at a certain point, whilst it was going on, there were certain kinds of fees that were not covered. The full cost of financing secondary education in Ghana is made up of investment, and recurrent cost is also made up of salary, which constitute the highest proportion contributed by government, and non-salaries to be borne by parents. As a result of the general increase in the cost of education due to inflation, the recurrent cost also increased together with the non-salary contributed by parents. Now, as I prepared for this, I made reference to a paper that I published in 2018. That was a fee-free secondary education in Ghana. Reflections on the past, realities, and feasible choices. On the past, meaning that you have to look at other interventions. FQ, school feeding, and what about the third one? FQ, school feeding, that's the third one. And the capitation grant. These things, they start as a pilot, and it's only the year that they start and it continues. After some time, it fizzles out. There are challenges, there are problems, and instead of sitting down and brainstorming and decide and chart a different path, we keep following the same path. The paper that I published was a reflective analysis rooted in both historical and contemporary expressions of education financing in Ghana. It considered the feasibility of the policy, its sustenance, and drew on past policies and practices in Ghana and other country experiences. It reflected on the past pro-poor interventions in Ghana and their outcomes. Findings suggested that a universal fee-free policy will be burdensome on government's limited resources and affect the quality of education delivery. The paper concluded that a gradualist approach or a phased implementation of the program through means testing and pro-poor targeting could lead to better management and practice of the policy. Emeritus Professor Kit Lowen, who has researched extensively on secondary education financing, contends that systems that adopt selective fee waivers are able to achieve the target of increasing enrollment compared to systems that adopt a completely fee-free secondary system, stressing that there is more equity in systems that adopt selective fee waivers in comparison to fee-free systems. In a study in 2008, our own Professor Kwame Champon, now at Open University UK, pointed out that boarding fees alone constituted about 60% costs of the Ghanaian secondary school student. Per the details of the 2022 free SHS budget submitted to Parliament and approved, I didn't get the actual, but whether the actual or what was presented is neither here or there. It was what we submitted as Education Ministry and approved is what is important. The cost of boarding fees alone for the combined cohorts from SH1, SH2, SHS1, SHS2, SHS3 is now 81.2%. And I'll show figures later to reflect this, of total student cost, which means what is being spent on day students is less than 20%. Now, country experiences. For the want of time, I'll be detailed on the case of India, but I've looked at Sri Lanka, where additional contributions were made to the budget by paying some facility fees. Thailand, the lower level education was made free for students only in selected villages. In Kenya, there were provision of bursaries and scholarships only for needy students, because they started and they also had some problems. In Zimbabwe, at a point in time considered that full financing for secondary education was not sustainable, and reviewed how to make better use of existing capacity without unsustainable cost burdens. At a point, they explored whether the resources available could be used to contribute to less conventional modes of delivery, distance and mixed mode education were explored, and they've played a significant role in the development of their secondary education. Malawi. In a study in Malawi, they recommended that if non-essential boarding was abandoned or charged at the full rate, secondary enrollments might be increased without additional expenditure. Uganda, and so on and so forth. But the India one is interesting. Interesting because they thought seriously about it. Now, in India, in 2007, India attempted to universalize secondary education. Unlike elementary education, the Indian Constitution does not guarantee commitment to making secondary and post-secondary education free. Prior to the implementation of the universalization program in 2007, the highest advisory body on education in India set up a subcommittee in 2004. Prior to the in 2007, a body was set up in 2004 to prepare a blueprint for the program. At the end of the subcommittee's work, 3 major recommendations were made. I'll just read one. The program should be decentralized, with each state developing its own plan. Now, in India, expansion focused primarily on 4 main groups. These included street children, ethnic minorities, rural settlers, and child laborers. Each group had specific programs that targeted their special needs. For rural settlers, the government started by building pay-setter schools. The government encouraged the setting up of residential schools for ethnic minorities, and also introduced residential bridge courses for street children and child laborers. But what I want to read is what the Prime Minister said when he was inaugurating this. The Prime Minister, at the launch of the universalization of secondary education, succinctly posited, and I quote, "We are setting out the goal of universalization or of universalizing secondary education. This is clearly the next steps after universalizing elementary education. While the goal is laudable, much work needs to be done before we are in a position to launch the scheme for universalization of access for secondary education. Its details need to be quickly spelled out and discussed." Please listen. Its details need to be quickly spelled out and discussed with states so that we are fully ready to launch it from 2008-2009. Right. We must not underestimate the complexity of this task, as the principles for universalizing elementary education cannot be easily transferred to secondary education. The Prime Minister speaking. Clear. Clearly, the recognition by the Prime Minister not to underestimate the complexity of the program is a caution worth considering. Now, I've talked about the F-Cube, I've talked about the capitalization grants briefly. All I'm saying, there were problems with it, which we should have learned from it. And we didn't. Now, let's look at some figures. Some trends in expenditure by level of education. Sorry. Okay. Right. Right. Now, this is from 2012 to 2015, but it's up to 2022. I'll show that later on. Now, look at the preschool budget 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, and then look at the levels. And then look at what SHS, right. You know, this SHS, before, sorry, I think, yes. Before SHS, we started in 2017. So these are the levels. I've done a summary at the end of, so you look at it. Okay. Now, 2016 was the last year of, that's pre-SHS. Now, sorry? Yeah, pre-free SHS. Yeah, pre-free SHS. Yes, thank you. Now, look at 2016. The money spent on preschool was 484, and this is in millions. In millions. So it's actually CD million. And primary was 1.3 trillion. And DHS was 1 trillion. SHS had 786 million. Now, look at 2017. Preschool reduced to 15 million. Primary, 40 million. DHS, 39 million. And then free SHS started increasing, 571 million. You look at the percentage. Then it goes on like that all through. You know, at a point 2018, preschool had 6 million, and primary 14 million, JHS 8 million, and free SHS took a chunk of it, 1.1 trillion. Those of you who are very much aware of the Annual Mensa Committee report, which introduced the preschool or the KG, the whole idea was to strengthen the basic education. Fine. As a family, when we embark on a new journey and we have to withdraw money from here and there and so on, maybe first year, second year, and the third year, fine. But we should know that if we want to continue for the fourth and fifth year, we are killing some other levels. And that is my worry. Others going down for some period because of what we have embarked on, I have no problem with it. But what plan do we have as a country to ensure that we don't continue to weaken the very foundation of the education system? Now, the interesting bit of it, oh, sorry. See, when you are not used to some of these things. Yes. Yeah. So the interesting bit of it is the summary. Yes. Where I've combined all the basics together with the preschool, primary, and JHS, right, in 2016. It was 2 trillion. Now, from 2017, see the totals. You know. Now, I think that this is a very, very, very serious thing. But let's just end by let's look at this one. This is just for us to see the ratio between the day and the body for the first year students or the first semester of the 2022 academic year. That's the fee per semester, and total amount is what is on the right, and the percentage was on the right. 23.77%. Now the overall for the second semester was this. Yes, now this is the consolidated one. All three cohorts, what I referred to earlier, from 1 to from 3, 19% as against 81. Now, let me just conclude. Reflecting on the issues raised above, implementing free secondary education in Ghana may have been more desirable if a gradualist approach or a phased implementation of the program had been adopted. Learning from other country experiences could lead to better management and practice of the policy. With the problem of inadequate resources and delays in fund release to schools, as had been with other safety net interventions in the past, a strategy for means testing to target the poor and the vulnerable could have been adopted as an initial phase. Such a strategy, no doubt, will be another task in a country where a lot of income is earned in the informal sector, thereby making it difficult to assess real family income levels. I do not think as a country we have many options. The argument about free secondary education often focuses on issues about access and not enough about the content and the outcomes expected. Matters about skill development, teacher orientation and reorientation and training and development, as well as new pedagogical approaches, are less stressed. Clearly, a fair attention to all these is likely to produce students ready to transition either to the tertiary level or to the world of work. The policy of making secondary education free and available to all is a lofty one. But such a goal would be useless and needlessly expensive if all it does is to create opportunities to give young people access without the skills, that will make them great assets for the nation's development. Reforming what will be taught and how they are taught are important. Otherwise, the problems are likely to be compounded. I thank you.
Wow, is that the best you could do? Amazing. Professor Atu Esuman, I wonder how you're able to do all of that in 40 minutes. I really wonder, because, I mean, there was policy there, there was law there, there was history there, there was geography there, you know, all kinds of things. There was Excel there, you know. It's really good. This is a good basis for where we're going. So I'm not going to waste much time at all. This is Achimota Speaks, coming to you live from the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. If you're excited, put your hands together. We just listened to the keynote speech delivered eloquently by the guest speaker on the governance, management, and financing of secondary education in Ghana. So our plan is to now welcome the panel, who will give us the initial thoughts on the presentation. Then they would share their perspectives on some aspects of the topic, after which we'll open the floor for the rest of you to also contribute. So we're really excited. In no particular order, I want to welcome my panel. First, Dr. Edem Welbeck. Please put your hands together for Dr. She's a big woman. She has a PhD in accounting and finance, lectures Department of Accounting, University of Ghana, and adjunct lecturer at Wisconsin, an examiner for professional examinations, ICA, pick a nice seat, prof. She's also a board member of the OLA Senior High Girls, and the global president of the POGA, Past OLA Girls Association. Put your hands together for Dr. Welbeck. Wow. This term, global president, has become very prominent. My boss is also now the global president of Swedru Secondary School. It's a mess. You know, since he got that post, every weekend he's in the school. He can't sleep. Samuels, are you here? Where are you? Wonderful. So now we are very close to the old boys thing. So Joel, I know you are losing hair. It's a great position. Also on the panel is the president of the National Association of Graduate Teachers, who we know as a consistent voice on education, Angel Carbon. Please put your hands together for Angel. Angel, please come. Angel has risen through the ranks from the Great Accra chairman to vice president. To, you know, some people, when they do union work, they move into politics. As for you, union, so you did union 30 years. You don't want to go anywhere, you know. So he's very principled, and we really enjoy talking to him on our programs. We also have a member of the executive committee of OAA and the chairman of OAA's academic subcommittee, who chairs the Changing Lives Education Fund, an NGO that awards scholarships and mentors Ghanaian students. Key member of the planning committee, Yao Benny Amponsa. Where is he? Put your hands together for Yao. And last but not least is a very important organization that we consider critical to where we want to go with this type of advocacy. Mrs. Irene Sam, excuse me, is the PRO of the National Council of Parent-Teacher Associations of Ghana. She's also the chief executive of an NGO known as Virtuous Womb Initiative. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mrs. Irene Sam as well. So this is the National Council for PTAs. Wonderful. Prof, you can't go and sit down after such a powerful speech. So we want to invite you to join the panel so that we would have you dot the I's and cross the T's if you have to. So what I'm going to do is to invite each of the panel members to just share a few brief thoughts on what they've heard. I think Prof did a fantastic job in grouping the issues. You dealt with management and governance. So you gave us, it's more like annotated presentation. So I'm not going to frame it at all. As you sat there listening, as you took notes, what jumped at you? But I want to just be sure all your mics are on. So Yao, hello, how are you doing?
Fine.
Can you hear Yao? No, you have to speak up. Yao, how are you doing?
Hello.
Wonderful. Mrs. Irene Sam?
Hello.
Wonderful. Angel?
Hello.
Wonderful.
Hello.
Good. So I think everybody's fine. I haven't been mic'd, so I'll stand here. Oh, I'll be mic'd. Okay. So let me take general thoughts. Angel, since you called me to ask me where Ghana Academy of Arts and Science is in 2023, you know, see, Angel's father is my brother's godfather. We grew up in Medina. There's nothing I can say that he doesn't know. So he said, Bernard, where is the place? He's going to some other place. So you give the opening thoughts, Angel.
Yes, thank you very much. When I was coming here, I had some Facebook messages, and some people were pleading with me not to come and talk about Rastafarians. So I am not going to talk about that. But let it suffice everybody to know that we were emphasizing on the authority of the institution to manage the institution in such a manner that will bring out well brought out students for the good of Ghana in the future. That was our objective. Now, when Prof was presenting his write-up, I felt like, Prof, you have become a member of NAGRAT, because when Free Senior High School was announced by government, we congratulated government for announcing Free Senior High School, but we cautioned government that we've been down this road before, where when we were in school, there were agitations in the universities because the universities wanted to introduce fee paying, because money from government was not forthcoming and the facilities in the universities were running down. Someone ought to pay up for the universities to run. We've gone down this road before, because throughout history there have been attempts in intervention. You don't pay for books, you don't pay for these facilities. At the end of the day, government could not keep up. And we knew that government was going to renege on its responsibility, because the resources of government is always in competition with other needs and wants. The saddest aspect is the basic schools. Take a trip to any public basic school today. All our public basic schools are running down. When you go to communities like Choko, Jamestown, where people have established ramshackle private schools, those shackled schools are getting students more than the public basic school within that community. The confidence in public basic school today is almost gone, because the public basic schools do not have resources. All the resources and every attention is now shifted to Free Senior High School. And we have a country where we are facing dire economic challenges. I don't know what the situation is going to be next year, but I can assure you that from where I sit, government will have to come up with some review policy, or we cannot maintain the Free Senior High School situation. Let me just end by saying that there was a particular school just last week. I don't want to mention the name of the school, because a student of that school is here and I don't want to get the headmaster into trouble. The flour for making bread got short just last week, and the PTA chairman and the board chairman had to come to school, cough up money from somewhere to provide some bags of flour, and then start putting it on the various platforms for parents to come and make contributions to pay up. The school is near University of Ghana, Legon. That's what happened just last week. You know, so government is beginning to have challenges, and Bernard, government is beginning to have challenges in supporting the senior high schools. And the earlier we do something, the better.
Thank you, Angel. We'll take a comment from Dr. Welbeck. Any thoughts? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I would look at whether we should veer off between access and quality. The question is, I think that the United Nations continues to talk about access. Everybody trying to get into schools, but the question is quality. As all students, I think we are passionate about quality, what we met and what is happening now. Again, today the universities are worried because our students are not thinking critically. Reasoning is a problem. Collaboration is a problem. How do we get these students to think on their own, to sacrifice for our country? That is also an issue. And again, I think like he said, I just returned from my school yesterday from a board meeting. And the headmistress was complaining. They had called her because some parts of the school had gone off. What does she do? Financing. She had to call on PTA. She's calling on all students to support. How do we trade off control and financing? Do we give control to those who are contributing more? I think that is something we must all begin to think about. Who should control? Should it be the old students who are sacrificing a lot today? Everything the schools are calling old students. Food, it is old students. Because the PTA, somewhere, somehow, are more interested in how to get the students to pass. And so quality has become an issue today. Creative thinking, the student-teacher ratio is a problem. The classrooms are not there. How do we even maintain the infrastructure that we have? Financing. How do we raise financing to build more schools? The government has promised, and yet we see increment in numbers. Every year we are seeing increment. Last year, those who left were just a handful. I believe for all of us sitting here, if we go back to the database, to our heads, we will realize that it has doubled. The number of students who left last year have doubled. Yeah. What they have pushed to the headmasters and headmistresses have doubled. Yeah. What do? It is a problem. Our children are there. Should we form a group and decide to take over part of the school? Should we become an NGO? Should we form trustees? So that we can go and partner the government and say, we are here. We want to partner you in financing the school. Even though most of us are on the board, like the presenter said, where does our decision end? You make a decision and the heads are telling you we have to run it by municipal. It must go to regional. And so you ask yourself, why am I sitting here? The community, some schools cannot do much. There is regional variation. We must, yes, also think about quality. But can we also consider equality of the quality? Can we think about that? That is not possible. And so, one size fits all, as he said, cannot work. Okay. We must look at different governance structures, ownership structures for different sectors and schools that we have. Because we cannot. Yes, the government itself has given grades. We have the grade A schools, we have the grade B schools, and the grade C schools. Yeah. The governance structures across cannot. And so we need to come out with certain governance structures that will fit grade A schools, be suitable for grade B schools, to bring all of us up. Wonderful. So that the equality of the quality, we can keep working at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Not to try and summarize, but I see some nice buzzwords which I want to highlight. Access versus quality, quality versus control and financing, and then the equality within the quality. Very, very nice indeed. I want to bring in Mrs. Sam. Your opening thoughts. Thank you.
Very much. So I represent the National Council for Parent-Teacher Associations. and we are the governing authority for all pre-tertiary institutions regarding their PTA's operations. And our basic mandate over the years has always been to complement government's efforts. And that's what we have done these years. You can go to all the schools in Ghana, and our testimonies are so evident. There is no school in Ghana here that you cannot see anything that has to do with PTAs. PTAs have come to stay, and we are just doing our job. But looking at the current trend in education, we are seeing that education is heavily bleeding under the free senior high school policy. And we remember very well that when this policy was introduced, we as a council, we held a forum whereby we invited the then Minister for Education, who is now the Minister for Education, to come and throw more light to the operations of free senior high school. And then we envisage that there will be a time that government cannot alone sponsor education. Government alone cannot manage education. Government alone cannot govern education. And where they have placed education right now, the average Ghanaian parent is so much confused. Today they are vacating, tomorrow they are coming. You don't even know when they are vacating, don't even know when they are coming. We don't know the content of what our wards are studying in school. Parents are so much ignorant about it. There is no form of education in that regard. And we see that government is playing with our wards. Whatever decision they are taking is in the interest of our wards. And we as PTAs, we are so much interested in the holistic development of our wards. Look at their welfare needs, their educational needs, their emotional needs. Is so of a much concern unto us. So we are saying that education is bleeding, and we have to come in to help. We have to come in to alleviate it. When you go to various schools today, our walls are bleeding, our walls are speaking. Things are not going on well, and the government portion of education is so close, said that the heads of schools cannot say anything going on. They can't talk about the challenges confronting free senior high school. They want everybody to be quiet. You are giving something to my ward. I have every right to look at what you are giving to my, whether it's of quality, whether it's accessibility or anything else. But here's the case that government wants to place us in a certain corner, but we are not going to relent at all. We are going to stand up and then do our job, because we are stakeholders in education. We are partners, we are collaborators, and we are in to help, because all that government is doing is in the interest of our wards. So we are so much concerned. Rather, they say no more extra classes. When we know that instructional time is not fully exhausted, they need ample time to exhaust whatever they have to exhaust. And then you tell us that they can't organize classes for our wards. When parents are willing to support, parents are willing to motivate teachers to help them, now they are saying it's PA. Where from PA? We have raised our association as PTA, and now you are calling it PA to seek your own interests. We have our ward, we have named our baby as PTA, and you are calling it PTA. You are calling it PA. For what reason? You have no document to prove that, and you are saying it's PA because they want to politicize education. And we are not going to sit down and look on and see all these things going on, because they are toiling with the future of our wards. The destiny of our wards is at stake here. And we as parents, we will not sit down and look on. We will do what you have to do to salvage our wards, whether good or bad. They are with us. They are our assets before they become government assets. They should understand this fact. And then leave out to operate. They can't silence all stakeholders like that. They must allow institutions to work, association to work, for us to help, give a helping hand to education, to salvage our education. We are in here to talk about all these issues, and we are so much serious about this. We won't keep quiet again. We will talk, we will relent, and we will make sure that the education of our wards is highly respected. Thank you.
Choboy. Angel, you see, when you got your 5 minutes, you were casting insinuations at my school. You should come and take over your post. You are the unionist, but she's taking over. Wonderful. We like the energy. I'll take Yao's comment, then I have a question for the speaker. Yao, what are your thoughts on what you heard so far?
I was just telling Professor Suma that he said alumni and parents should speak.
Yeah.
He's just heard a very passionate speech. But on 24th July 2021, we convened a meeting in one of the meeting rooms just around the corner from here. And alumni associations of 26 schools attended. We didn't like the trends that we're seeing in education. As my former boss used to say, trend is your friend. If you can see the trend early, you can do something about it. So we met, we had a discussion for about, I think, most of the day. And afterwards, we wrote to the Minister of Education and said, we've had a discussion, these are our thoughts, but we're just requesting a meeting with him to understand what his objectives are and how we can help. I submitted a letter, it was on 16th August 2021. As of today, we are still waiting for the meeting. He's not even bothered to acknowledge it. We've been persistent. Once I spent the entire morning waiting in his office. And Professor Ite tends to tease me from time to time because he predicted that it would come to nothing. And Prof, if I had a stone, I'll give it to you. We tried to escalate it upwards and said, look, alumni, so that was the beginning of the Alumni Alliance, which is now an unincorporated body. We meet frequently, we speak, we put our heads together. And we tried to escalate it upstairs, and we've still had no joy. So on a major policy decision, major sector like education, a stakeholder like alumni who basically fund all, well, not all, but most of the infrastructure projects in the schools, we are just seeking audience to help. And we are not getting that audience. And yet, let any celebrity rapper come to Ghana and, you know, anyway. So, I've been working with Professor Suman, so I'm aware of the statistics that he shared. And it is consistent with what I know from Achimota School, because I played a role in the budget some time ago. The total budget, annual budget, for instance, this year, is approximately 18 million cedis for the school. Out of that, about 13 million is teacher remuneration. So that's about 72%. The remaining 5 million cedis, which is used to run the school for 4,300 and about 4,350 students, that's not even all paid on time, because some of it, I know some money that was due first semester 2021 was only received about a month ago. So my thinking is, if there are 4,300 odd students, even if only 1,000, less than 20%, were to pay 5,000 cedis a semester, which is reasonable for secondary education, that would immediately double the operating income of the school. Go up from 5 million to 10 million. Even if only 1,000 students out of 4,300 were to pay 1,000 cedis a semester. So then the question is, okay, who should constitute that 25%? Who should pay and who should get it for free? And this is where means testing comes in. Now, I differ from most people I've spoken to who seem to think that means testing will be difficult. I think it will be the easiest thing to do. We could put a credible solution in place in a month or two. And it's simple. Off the top of my head, I can list about 8 or 9 databases containing information on Ghanaians that the government already holds, right? From the electoral register, national ID, national health insurance, customs, imports, all of that, right? Registrar General, DVLA, SNET, all of that. Now, imagine that Google, not in Ghana, Google, you sitting in Ghana just by the websites you visit, they can construct a reasonably accurate economic profile of you just by the websites that you visit. So imagine actually holding data, right? Actually holding data. So all that government has to do is to mine the data it already holds. That's all it has to do. So if you take anybody, let's say you live in Cantonment, you're a director of a company, you own a business, you own 2 cars according to DVLA.
We know what you can afford.
We know what you can afford. We know you can pay 5,000 cedis a semester for your child. So, alumni, we're seeking audience. We've been doing so for almost 2 years. We think that we have ideas that would benefit secondary education. And it would not take rocket science to implement these ideas.
Wonderful. Thank you. Please put your hands together for the panel. All right. So, look, we have half an hour for the panel and another half an hour for questions. So we can't solve all the problems. So what I want to do is, Prof, I'm taking a cue from you. You gave us 2 keywords, effectiveness and efficiency. Effectiveness is doing the right thing. Efficiency is how you do it. Yeah, listening to you, the problem is, the government's problem is that it's not as if they don't know how to do the means testing. They don't want to do it. Right? So the question we have to answer here is, how do we get political leadership to do the right thing? Because all of us know what the right thing is. Then the how to do it is a secondary question. Because you've reached out to somebody in 2021, he's not responded. It means he wants to do his own thing. So the problem here is not that we don't have a method for doing means testing. The problem is that the desire to engage, to actually do the right thing is not there. Okay. So I think the first question for all of us is, how do we force the conversation? Like she's doing. How do we force the conversation? We have a year and a half to an election. That's the first question we need to answer. Because Prof has given us enough. In fact, if you look through his policy choices, he's even given 3 methods on the financing. If you read this document, there's nothing you need to know that you don't know. So I don't want us to reinvent the wheel, because there are ideas about how to do it. But the problem is that the politicians don't want to listen to us. Please, am I making sense? So I feel this program and the panel should, and we have all the stakeholders, right? So on this panel, we have parents. All of us are parents. But specifically the 2 of you're a parent, represent PTA. And you also, we have alumni. You are here, you are here. We have teachers. You are here. We have policy. You are part of policy. You're not a politician, but you're policy. We have media. The only person who is not here is the guy who is actually making the decision. Do you understand? So the question we have to ask ourselves, and this is what I want the panel, how do we make the main thing the main thing? What do we do to get this issue of an optimal way of ensuring balance between access and quality becomes the central thrust of secondary education policy in Ghana? How do we get that to be the main thing? So if there are any takers for the panel, yes.
It's now going to be very difficult, because the analysis was made very well on your radio show a few days ago, where no political party apart from the New Patriotic Party can touch free senior high school. because it has become highly political. If the NDC comes to power and they attempt, they'll become very unpopular. Though you and I can make the analysis, that analysis is not going to go down to the poor parent who lives in Kolegono, who wants the child to go to school for free. The issue is that the parents, the direct beneficiaries of free senior high school, will have to speak to government. Because when I go to St. Mary's Secondary School today, I can see that facilities are deteriorating in front of me. Running a school is not only about feeding students. It's about providing infrastructure and ensuring that the resources are there adequately enough for teaching and learning to take place. That is where you get quality. And for you to have those resources for teaching and learning to take place, it takes availability of resources and the timeous provision of those resources. If monies that were supposed to be supplied last semester is now being supplied, though it has been supplied, it has not been supplied timeously. And the effective or the defective situation is such that what you should have done a few months ago, you cannot do those things today. So quality is being compromised. And let me say something, the fact that you have 8 A's doesn't mean that you've got quality education. As a teacher, I know what I'm talking about. You know, I'm not saying you shouldn't go and study. No, I'm not saying you should not go and study, but there is something more than making 8 A's. I have invited, when I was a host on Radio Universe, I invited a first-class student from the University of Ghana to be a panelist. After 5 minutes, she had to run away. It happens very often in this country. So what I'm saying is that to provide, and Prof said that when they were in the University of Sunset, they got holistic students from Achimota who excelled in sports, who excelled in they were all-round students. That is what I'm talking about. Today, do you know that sports is almost no more in our schools? Cultural activities and social activities are almost dead. Those days, as a young boy, small boy, growing up in the house of a very stern and strict Voltairean teacher, and you can know what I'm talking about. Who excelled in they were all-round students. That is what I'm talking about. Today, do you know that sports is almost no more in our schools? Cultural activities and social activities are almost dead. Those days, as a young boy, small boy, growing up in the house of a very stern and strict Voltairean teacher, and you can know what I'm talking about. I was reading a certain compilation called Talents for Tomorrow. Those were written by secondary school students, and the very good ones were compiled and distributed to schools. Today, who is writing anything for anyone to read? So quality education is highly compromised.
I want to pick something and ask the panel. You were saying that because of the political nature of free SHS, if any other political party comes into power and they touch it,
it will have political implications.
Good. So, but the question is, what do parents want? Do we know? Are parents divided into two? Are there parents like her who are seeing quality deteriorate and say, we want you to do means testing and let us pay? Or there are group of parents who are like, we didn't have education, we have it, we don't care about quality.
No, parents want quality. But then level-headed people will have to come in to find solution that my brother is suggesting that, look, as a country, we have people with needs. Can we identify these people with needs? And look, if I'm able to pay the school fees of my child at Christ the King, from class 1 to JSS 3, can't I pay the school fees of my child in senior high school? I certainly can. So and you see, we have to do some work and set the criteria and say that, look, everybody cannot have it for free. But we need to identify people So that people will also not, will not only say that because you don't have money, you don't go to school. But if we have the resources, let's be able to pay so we free up resources for other progress and development in our schools.
This is a good point. I'm just asking, you see, because we're talking about the political cost of a decision like this, will the average Ghanaian parent, particularly those who didn't have access to education, who are now enjoying it, will they be happy to say some should pay, some shouldn't pay? Will they not interpret this as a way of depriving them of education? Maybe you are the parents. Let me get the ladies' views, madam, first.
I don't think that if the government appeals to parents, like he said, they are people who are reasoning, who can afford to pay. And I think that the government would have to do a lot of education and sensitization to be able to create that distinction between those who can afford and those who cannot. Again, with the school system, if you can afford, you would have to go to this school because these are the schools we have created for those who can afford. I think if you take the UK and all other countries, it is there. In UK, you have the grammar schools. If you want to attend a grammar school, you pay for it. If you are not interested, you go to the public school, and that is free. And so I think that any government that comes would have to create that distinction to say that these schools, this is what we have categorized it. If you want to go there, you have to pay, self-financing. And then if you cannot afford, we still give you the opportunity to still attend secondary school, but you have to go to these schools.
So in your suggestion, you are distinguishing, so that the category A schools, so-called, will they be your fee-paying schools?
Of course, Bernard. Today, whether we all like it or not, there is even now, and there's more pressure on the category A schools because even the politicians are pushing the children there. I was talking to somebody, and the person said, Presec has now become a political school. Why? Wesley Girls has become a political school. Why? Because all the politicians will go there and create the space for their votes. And you and I, who may have struggled and are contributing to make our schools what it is, don't have access.
The politicians are actually sending their constituents there.
Exactly.
They are sending their awards to TIS.
Exactly. And
but
so
that's a different point.
But not all.
Yes. So you made a very important point. I just wanted any comments on that, Prof. The political economy of solving this complicated problem.
Well, let me just comment on the issues that have been raised.
Yeah.
I think when the chairman was making his opening remarks, he said that what we are going to discuss today may mean different things, to different people, depending on our circumstances.
Yeah.
I think the point we are making is not everybody must pay. Right. I mean, even with the elite schools, if we decide to use them, right, I think there must be some regulation that will allow some 30% or 20 or 25% from people from other areas that are deprived to be in some of these schools. Those people, the government has a responsibility to ensure that they also attain education at those high elite school level. But I think that we have all the information. When we are going to embark on a project, the World Bank, African World Bank, because I was in charge of that at a certain point in education, we do means testing. The pilot district that we choose have been chosen using a certain criteria of vulnerability. And education has that map, local government has that map. So sometimes I find it difficult when we are saying, well, we don't know how to go about it. As he said, if we want to do it, we can find it. And let me give this example. The professor that I mentioned, in Professor Kwame Achampong, he lives in London. When his children were young and they went to school, because of his level, If the child decides to eat, he pays for it. His other mates who are not in a certain income bracket, it's free. So I think that this is the principle that we are adopting. We are a country, all hands are not equal, abilities are different. Let's spend time and money and determine, using the data which we have, which we don't use for anything, and decide who should pay and who should.
Wonderful. I wanted a comment from Mrs. Sam about the Parent Association and how far-reaching it is, and what type of parents are there, and whether the way you eloquently spoke here, you are able to advocate for parents to understand the core issues, so that if a government wants to engage on the means testing or the cost recovery or whatever, they will not misunderstand it. So just talk a bit about how many parents you have influence over and what you need to do to get more of them to understand where we are.
So we as a council, we have various platforms for parents in every senior high school. On our PTA platforms, we educate parents on the need to be involved in the education of their wards. And then we can see the massive support that we are gaining. Parents of today have become so abreast with the kind of education that is being offered in their wards. And I can tell you that 90% of parents are willing to support. They are willing to come in. Yes, discerning parents have come aboard that they want to support.
90% of your parents?
Yes.
Not of all parents?
Parents, in terms of our council, PTAs.
Yes, because you see, when you say 90% of parents are willing to pay, a newspaper are going to write that, and that's not true.
Okay.
Because that's not factual. So what you're saying is that 90% of the parents within your group are willing to pay.
Within our jurisdiction,
wonderful,
are willing to pay, to support. You know, when we're paying for fees and etc., there was a scheme like scholarship for those who are unable to pay. So that system can still run for those who are able to support in terms of education of their work. And right now, the parents that we have right now, they have become so abreast. They understand the issue, they understand the challenges, and they are willing to come in and support. All we are saying is that there should be a review. Let's see where we are going wrong. What can we do to alleviate it? What can we do to bring about a relief in that regard? Because the poor Ghanaian child is suffering, and we can't sit down and look on like that anymore. And then the politicians, where their wards are, go and see what they are paying them, and then they come back and tell the poor Ghanaian parent that don't pay anything. So we educate the parents during our PTA meetings for them to understand the issues on the ground. You see, we as a council, we look at the issue on the ground and we stick into it. We are not partisan, non-sectorial, whatever. We look at the issues on the ground. We go to the various schools, we know whatever is going on. Our walls will come to us, they know whatever is going on in the schools.
All right.
So we are so much abreast with it.
I have a question for you. As I said, I so this year, my mates in my school, honestly, look out, they are all doing projects. And each time they go to the school, they send me photos. So a friend of mine is about the horrible situation in the dining halls, the bathrooms. So we are building big projects, right? So my question is, what is the potential of alumni as a force for good education? Because Isabel have built a learning center over $1 million or whatever they call it. St. Augustine's have built a fantastic building. It's 500 students, right? Motown, they are building a major project as well. How do we use old school pride and the fact that a lot of the old students are many of them youth to actually come to the table in a more forceful way?
I wouldn't use the word potential because that relates to our ability to do something in the future. But we are doing it now, right? The OAA built a science lab, a new science lab for Achimota School for over $1 million. And then we found out that we needed to go and find money to buy reagents because they weren't using the lab. They didn't have So after building the lab, we then needed to go and find money to buy the things that they needed to use the lab, right? So these are things that we're doing already, but the question is always, among our alumni, the question is, you don't have any control, right? You don't have any input into what actually goes on in the school, even though it's changed a little bit due to now we have a headmaster who is very collaborative. But people don't want to pay. Yeah. Okay. People don't want to pay when you can't influence the outcomes. Yeah. And as we've already said, that our participation in governance a lot of the time is nearly meaningless. So
no, but see, my question is, how do you convert the equity of building a $1 million lab into a decision about how the school is managed? So I'm not saying the old boys are not doing. What I'm saying is that how do you convert that influence? You do bonfire, people come and shout and eat, but really, why don't you use the power of that, the convening power of the bonfire, the ability to raise $1 million to say, hey, if you want us to keep contributing to the school, these are the things we want to see. Otherwise, we're not going to do it. That's what I'm trying to say.
But what I'm saying is that we are doing precisely that, and that's part of the message. That's the reason why we want to have the audience with the minister or whoever in politics will listen. And they know that because we want to convert our influence into some measure of control, that's exactly why we are not getting the audience.
Wonderful. This is the Achimota Speaks. We're talking about the management, governance, and financing of secondary education. It's live at the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. Wow. Our panel have been deliberating on the issues arising from the presentation eloquently delivered by Professor Suman. I wanted to give some of the people here the chance to be seen on TV before we come back to the panel. It's very important. We can't spend 2 hours and just be talking from here. So, look, you are the guys in secondary school. I don't know if you're allowed. You can wear your mask and say something if your parents don't agree. But I really feel like we need to hear from the students, okay? I mean, when I was in Presec, I would have asked the question at a program like this, okay? So if you have something to say, if you feel like the issues are not being properly put, or you just have a view, please let me know. I'll give you the mic. Again, we have a number of alumni here, some of whom I believe can bring different perspectives. I really wanted to force some men to say something, because he's become the Suesco global president, and he's losing all his hair because of that. Bridget Jobenuku is also here. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to get the guys to bring you a mic, and then the cameraman will focus on you so that we will have a proper production. So let me start. I really wanted a younger person to set this up. Any student wants to say something? Yes, let's come to this student. For the first time, I can overrule Professor Gordon. I'll come to you.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. Dr. Welbeck said something about setting up different public schools in which, in specific public schools, students are made to pay because they are from wealthy homes, and in other public schools, students are paid for by the government. But is this pragmatic in light of the fact that a lot of parents are already not satisfied and are trying to push their students into grade A schools and into a certain class of schools? Besides that, we are pushing for equality of education and holistic education. If you are going to have rural students segregated in a particular class of schools and then rich students segregated in another class of schools, how are they going to interact and see that the world is more than their limited space?
Wow. Who said quality of education is coming down? This is high quality. What's your name? Okay, anyway, we don't want to reveal your name. It may have implications during the exams. So, you know, and yes, Professor Chris Gordon. A number of private school teachers were not happy with the way the thing was marked. So these days you have to be careful.
Okay, class of 75, Livingston House Prefect 77. Now, I would like the panel to comment on the legacy issue that is going to occur. You have a certain experience the students are having. Overcrowded, poor infrastructure, lack of contact hours, and they have entered the educational value chain and have been infected, in quotes. They are going to come out, and in 30 years' time, 40 years' time, they are going to be the decision makers and leaders. So what is happening now is going to have a long-term legacy impact on this country, and I would like your panel to reflect on that.
Yes. So please take note of this. I will take one quick comment, sign out from television, and then come back. So Professor Diamondson, since you are there, proximity, just give him the mic. If you can make it very short, so I...
Well, I'll make it short. The main speaker, Professor Suman, referred to the effect of the free senior high school on the lower level, the basic schools. And he gave us examples of the negative nature of these effects. Unfortunately, the effect is also beginning to be reflected at the higher level, at the universities. I happen to be one of 3 retired Accra former vice chancellors. The eldest is here, Professor Sawyer. I come after him in the 90s. So we know what is happening. At the beginning of this semester, we had a staff meeting at the chemistry department. And we were told that we had about 1,800 first-year students because of the increase in numbers at the free SHS level. Then we called our chief technician in to give us a status report on the glassware available. And we were shocked when the chief technician told us that we had 13 burettes. 13. 1, 3. Work the ratio. When I was in first year, and even when I was teaching Gordon in his first year, every student had a cupboard fully furnished with glassware. Peculiar to you alone. If you broke any, it was replaced, but you paid. Now we have 13 burettes for 1,800 students. Because orders that were placed 2 years, 3 years back have still not arrived because of procurement problems.
Wonderful.
That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Prof. So, this is still the Achimota Speaks, coming to you live from the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. For our viewers on City Television, we want to say thank you for joining us. You can continue watching on YouTube and Facebook because the stream will continue online. For those watching on television, the City Newsroom begins in a few moments. Thank you very much. Back in here, still streaming, there have been a number of comments which I feel the panel should address. Otherwise,
City TV on digital free-to-air TV, also on DSTV and on GoTV. Just gone by was our